Hello guys, I hope you guys can hear what I am saying, and I hope you guys can, um, yeah, I hope you guys are ready. So if you can hear what I'm saying, then you please just do let me know in the comment section. Here I was just preparing, like getting all the topics that I want to talk about, and because this session is more of we are going to talk about what we're going to be doing tomorrow. This is not the actual session where I'll be explaining certain concepts or going through the revision that is necessary. So with that being said, if you can hear me, then please do indicate in the comment section. Would really appreciate that. Of course, since this is a live session, people can always watch the session after and get a general idea of what was discussed and what went down during the live session. So in this session, I'm not going to be waiting any longer, but I would appreciate if people can do contribute to the live session in the comment section by letting me know if there's anything that I should add to the whole discussion for tomorrow's session or not. Please note that as I am talking about this session, I am going to also refer to the previous session, the previous C++ session that I held on Saturday, where I was talking about nested for loops and stuff like that. So if you missed that one, please do check it out because this session that I'm going to be talking about, which is going to be hosted tomorrow, is going to be based on the continuation of what we did last time. So with that being said, for those who have assignments that I do, and they would like to do some revision on the whole general idea of the C++ programming language, this is the perfect time for you. And hopefully the session will be as productive and as informative as it should be. Another thing that I want to add is that after I'm done talking about the preparation and everything pertaining to that, I'm going to shift to talking about the actual study session that is supposed to happen today. So once I'm done with that, since today is still a weekday, even though it's a Friday, I'm going to host a study session, which is going to be a continuation of this. And this study session is going to continue from whenever I'm done with this discussion of what is going to be happening tomorrow. I'm going to basically just mute and then I'm going to continue with the whole study session. So hopefully you guys are going to stay for the study session as well as much as you're going to stay for the discussion session, which is basically what is going to be happening until such a time comes where we're actually going to be um, studying, because I feel like Fridays are for studying after all. So with that being said, the first thing that I want to say is during the last session, we did cover the first program, which was I was talking about the whole idea of Hello World and what each line meant. And I remember I was talking about the hash include and what it meant. I spoke about the using namespace std. I spoke about int main. I spoke about what is inside the int main, what is an int main, the function of the return zero. I did speak about that as well, and as well as statements. So with that being said, that covers the first program. And if you understand the general idea of the first program, I would say that everything else that comes after is like building up from that idea of that first program that you would have written. That is why every programmer, when they started writing code, the first thing that they wrote is hello world. It's because it's a very simple and yet complex. I know complex and simple in one sentence kind of sound weird, but it's a very simple and yet complex idea on its own. The reason why I'm saying it's simple is because obviously it's just going to print hello world. That is a simple output to understand. But then if you look at the general idea of it, the fact that it's like the foundation of any programming language, anything that you do, the first thing you do is understand what is going on with the whole concept of hello world. Obviously you'd get to understand that it's also a complex idea, right? So with that being said, it brings me to the second part of this discussion, which is integers. I did discuss the different data types during the last session, I did speak about the function that each data type basically holds in the C++ programming environment. I did speak about how to use them. I did highlight everything pertaining to that. Of course, if you missed that, you can always go to the C++ Saturday session, which was hosted. I created a separate playlist for it. So that live session, you will be able to access it. Just go there and look at the different playlists. You see it's there. At the moment, it has one video, but as time goes, I'm gonna add different videos, including the one that I'm gonna host tomorrow. So we did speak about variables, did speak about integers. Obviously, the whole idea of variables is like they're placeholder. Okay, let me just add this for those who want to. For those who actually want to connect, you can connect with me. You can connect with me on my Instagram. Let's say you have a question and you are afraid of asking the question here, you can just send an Instagram DM and I will definitely respond to you. So that is that. And then now we're moving on to the fourth thing. Here we have assignment statement. We did speak about assignment statement, which is basically C out, C in, all that, right? What is found in the IO stream, which is the library, input output stream, the library, right? So we did speak about that and we did show some examples. And I think if you did follow what was happening in the previous session, you should have a generalized idea and you should be able to work with the assignment statements comfortably without any issue, right? Cool. Then the fifth thing that we spoke about is basically variable diagrams. I remember when we were doing the nested for loop, I did talk about how you can use variable diagrams to understand what's going on at each stage of your program, because the reality is it's not really easy to keep track of what is going on. It's easy to get these logical errors in your program if you don't necessarily understand what is going on overall. So with the use of variable diagrams, you can keep track of what is going on each line of your code and come up to a reasonable conclusion in terms of where your problem might be or what is going on with your code, because it's not all about writing code, it's about understanding what your code is doing after you've written it. Imagine if I were to write or solve a problem in mathematics, and then from there, I don't even know the procedure of solving that problem. Obviously, you're going to question whether I'm the one who actually solved the problem or not. The same idea applies when it comes to programming. Everything needs to make sense to the programmer, and in turn, they should be able to explain it to the other person, which is a sign of intense or massive understanding on its own. Cool. And then that is on the variable diagrams of things. So variable diagrams are applied everywhere, and you'll see that in tomorrow's session when I'm talking about programs. I am going to refer to variable diagrams in order to make people understand what is really going on with my program. Yes, you might not understand it at first, but if you can really give yourself some time, you should manage to get it. So that is that, variable diagrams, which was covered in the previous session. So these are important things you need to check out. Floating point numbers, I did cover that when I was talking about the data types. So it's very important for you to check floating point numbers. I spoke about floating point numbers, I spoke about integers, I spoke about characters, which is represented by char. I spoke about Boolean data type. I spoke about what else? String data type, right? Of which the string data type consists of its own library. Quite an important thing to take note of. So whenever you use a string, you have to include the hash include string library, right? And in so doing, you'll be able to use things like string stream, which allows you to deal with, especially if you're dealing with .txt files or .dat files and stuff like that. So that is quite important aspects or concepts that you need to be very fond of, especially when you are moving further into object-oriented programming. I did touch on that, so just make sure that you do visit the video because it does talk about that a lot, right? And then another thing that I want to highlight, which I feel like I didn't really highlight in my previous session, is the fact that When we talk about a floating point number, right, it has 4 bytes. But now there's double, of which they both store the same thing, which is a decimal number, a number with a decimal point, right? Like for instance, 5.25, that is a decimal number. So in that specific case, we can use a double or we can use a float. But in a general sense, you can use a float for that because a float has less, requires less memory and stuff like that, right? So in this case, I want you to understand something. So a float and a double are exactly the same thing. The only difference is that a double has double the storage or memory, double the memory that a float has. So whereas a float has 4 bytes, a double basically has 8 bytes, I mean. So in that specific case, you need to understand that most programmers who are not worried about memory or storage, whatever the case is, they most often use doubles because that allows them to accommodate more decimal points and bigger numbers and stuff like that, which is good if you're trying to deal with something like that. It's good, especially when it comes to the rounding off. You don't want your number to be rounded off to a certain decimal point, whereas you want it to be a certain number, right? So that is the whole idea of floating and double. If a double is basically a float with double the storage that a normal float would normally have. So I want you to take note of that. Whereas a float has 4 bytes of memory, a double has 8 bytes of memory. So those things, I just want you to take note of it and be mindful of that. Cool. So what that means is that if I can use my calculator over here, so what that means is that if you can use the idea of 2 to the power of n, where n represents the bytes, and you're trying to determine the size of the number that you can store in that specific storage. What that means is that with a float, we can store a 16-bit number, and then with a double, we can store a much bigger number. I don't know if it's 16 bits, but yeah, that's the whole idea. It's like double the storage, right? Double is bigger in a sense. Cool. And then we're moving on to the third thing, which was also discussed, which is lesson number 7, or which was topic number 7 that I discussed. And this was on the string and character variables. This falls under different data types. I did speak about them. I did talk about how to declare them. I did talk about what you need to include in order for you to manage to use them. So as a person, just make sure that you apply everything that I mentioned in that video. If you haven't watched it again, I'm not pushing anyone to, but it would be really helpful for you to actually watch it first, because I'm going to be using all these things that I've just mentioned, from integers, variables, assignment statements, variable diagrams, floating point numbers, strings, and character variables. I'm going to be using those from this point going forward. So in the next lesson that we're going to have tomorrow, it's going to be literally application or the use of these things in action, basically. And then we are going to talk about if statements. If statements, I didn't necessarily touch on them that much, and that is because no one asked or requested that I touch on them. However, provided that you guys want me to touch on if statements and go deeper in terms of explaining the general idea of if statements, I would say that, of course, comment in the comment section below. And then if you want me to touch on them, I can literally go deeper and make sure that I understand them. I explain them in detail, right? And then that is if statements. And then we have while loops. During the last session, we explained for loops and if I were to make a simple queuing system where the display can only show 2 numbers, it makes more sense to just use bytes instead of preset float altogether. Okay, so as a programmer, you need to understand what your desired output would be. I'm going to make an example of an integer. If I understand your question correctly, I'm going to make an example of an integer, right? So let's say, for instance, I want to output a certain integer, and I know this integer is a very huge number, like trillion type of thing. It would be really unreasonable for me to use just a normal int. Let's say int answer. Let's say that answer is going to be really big. It would be really unreasonable for me to use int answer. In that specific case, I should know, because of my memory management knowledge that, okay, fine, if I am to use int or long int or long int, or int cross 64, I would actually have more space or more memory to deal with. So it all comes down to you as the programmer, what specific output you're dealing with. And if you obviously, the more memory you use, in some case, depending on what you're dealing with, depending on the amount of memory that you have, it might be a good thing or a bad thing. If you have little memory, it's advisable for you to actually use something that will use less memory, like for instance a float. But if you have more memory, then I don't see a reason why you should not be using a double, because a double actually works better than a float. Or they work the same, but it all depends on the scenario. A double would never give you an error, as in your number is too big, whereas a float would actually tell you that, okay, fine, it cannot store this specific number. It might not tell you, but it might show you that by giving you an output that is unexpected. So that is what I can say pertaining to that. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Cool. So now I was on the while loops. On the while loops, guys, I would say if the limitation works in retrospect of the memory. Yes. So the limitation, every time when you're programming, in fact, if you're dealing with C++, if you're dealing with any language, right, you need to be very cautious. You need to be very mindful of the amount of memory that you have. You need to, it's like this, right? If you want to build a house, you have to be mindful of the material that you have at your disposal. You cannot try to build a mansion if you have, for example, 40,000 bricks. It's not going to happen. So it's a matter of, you need to be mindful of what you have at your disposal. Another thing is, you cannot try to build a mansion if you only have like a small amount of land. It's unreasonable because it's not going to fit, right? So it's all about, check what the amount of memory that you have, and then from there, work with that. But now, if you want to build a program that is going to work on many machines, and it doesn't require many, because you need to be mindful of the fact that some machines might have more memory than others, right? So which means you would need to be mindful to say, okay, fine, you know what? This is the one that I'm going to use, maybe a double, maybe a float, but it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. I can't say always use a double, because if you have less memory, it's going to affect you. But also, I can't say always use a float, because if you have to store a bigger number, it's going to affect you. So it all depends on the specific output and the amount of memory that you have. Those are the variables that you need to take note of, which is the memory and what you're trying to store. Cool. I hope I answered your question. Okay. I hope I answered your question. But yeah, I was saying, guys, so on the session, right? So on while loops, which is the second one. Okay, no, that's great. That's great. So on the while loop, I didn't touch on while loops, but I touched on for loops because I did explain nested for loops. So I would say that if you are an individual who actually struggling with while loops and you would like to understand different ways you can implement it and work around it, then I would say that just obviously you can just leave a comment in the comment section, because I believe in the next program that you're gonna write, you're probably gonna need those while loops. So if you want me to touch on that, I can just touch on it and make sure that you understand. Cool. That is on while loops. And then on the idea of, because if you understand for loops, there's a high probability that you understand what while loops are all about. So again, it all comes down to you as an individual. Do you understand while loops? Do you understand for loops? If you don't, comment in the comment section below and I'll make sure that I cover it. Of course, if you need tutoring, let's say for instance you are afraid of asking questions in this comment section or in this live or something, you can always reach me on my Instagram and then we can talk about ways in which I can assist you. Cool. And then we have program debugging. Debugging is a skill that everyone needs to have. Now, there are several ways in which you can debug. By using the CAsset library, you can debug that method. But also you can use the cout method, where you can place the cout the C out statement at different points of your code and get different outputs at different points as your program is running. That will tell you, okay, fine. Let's say the expected answer is 3, and you're seeing that, okay, on line 40, you're getting an answer of 2, and then on line, or maybe on line 40, you're getting an answer of 3, which is the required output or the desired output, and then on line 90, you're getting an answer of 2. So it means that between line 50 to 90, that is where the error is. And then you just work around that. But obviously, when you're debugging, you work with the whole code. You look at it as a whole thing. It's like an essay. Essay, you don't just look at that paragraph. You look at the whole essay and then try to make sense of what is going on from the top by line. So that is the whole idea, or the general idea with that, right? Cool. When it comes to debugging. But also, another thing that I wanted to know is the whole idea of variable diagrams. Very important, because you can use that method to actually debug. You can look at a variable diagram and check line by line where is the problem happening. And then from there, you can get a general idea of, okay, fine, this is where the problem is. So I want you to be mindful of that, and I want you to know that you can use variable diagrams again. That is literally the power of variable diagrams. Very, very important stuff. Cool. Now, I'm going to move on to the other point. I did speak about Boolean values, which is the true or false, represented by 0 and 1. Depending on the machine that you're using, 1 can represent a true and a 0 can represent a false, right? But again, most often, but not, 1 represents a true and 0 represents a false, of which a 1 can represent, like if you look at electronics, maybe you're talking about the transfer of an electron or something like that, or an electric signal or something. So 1 can represent the electrical movement from one point to another, meaning that something is on, and then 0 can represent off in that case. So it's like an on and off type of thing. And in a case of, let's say, for instance, we're talking about the building of CPUs and stuff like that. Obviously, let's say, for instance, we're dealing with how a CPU operates, right? And you have a CPU that works. Let's say you have a CISC architecture, right? So with the CISC architecture, if I can just drift for a moment from the idea of C++, with the CISC architecture, it stands for Complex Instruction Set Computer, right? So we have CISC and then we have RISC. So the idea of a CISC computer is that it only consists of complex instructions. Like, for instance, I'm going to give you an example of make tea. Now, the statement that says make tea can be broken down into several steps that result in a cup of tea, for example, right? So with a CISC architecture, maybe we are dealing with a CISC processor, CPU, central processing unit, right? So in this specific case, the compiler doesn't do much of writing more instructions. There's less complex instructions, less number of instructions. Make tea, for example. This instruction is going to be taken to the CPU. Now, in the CPU, which is the hardware part of things, in order for this complex instruction to be broken down into microcode or micro processes. Microprocesses are basically smaller processes, like, for instance, go to the kitchen, take a cup, put sugar. Those are microprocesses. These microprocesses are most often found in the CPU. Now, here's my point when I talk about the whole thing about Boolean, right? There we have already there are two ways, right? We can have a CPU that consists of hardwired microcode, or we can have a CPU that has programmed microcode. For instance, in this case, if it's programmed, there'll be more code written in the CPU. If it's not, it means that we're going to have less, right? So if it's hardwired, it means that when the complex instruction comes from memory, because it's stored in memory, when the CPU requests that, and that complex instruction comes that says make a cup of tea, the decoder, the CPU's decoder, is going to break down that complex instruction into micro microprocessors. And these microprocessors will be, let's say, for instance, on that hardwired processor, it's going to switch on certain points of the processor, indicating that these are the microprocessors that needs to be integrated to come up with a specific output. And then after that, the execution, or the CPU execution, is going to take over and then execute, resulting in an output, right? So that is it when it comes to that. So the whole idea is about on and off of a certain point of a CPU. And this is basically what the whole general idea is about the Boolean values, true or false, or on and off. Cool. Ones and zeros, binary. Cool. Now we're gonna move on to the next thing, which is nested if statements. So if you understand if statements and you want to understand the general idea about nested if statements, obviously you need to comment in the comment section below and tell me if you actually want me to go through it. I did not go through it during my previous session because no one asked about it. But again, like I said, you want to know about it, you text in the comment section below, and then I'll go through it and make sure that you understand. That is it on that, on nested if statements, like if statements, but now they're just nested, just like for loops. Basically, this general, it's the same idea. So if you watch the video and you understand for nested for loops, then there's no way you will fail to understand nested if statements. You just need to understand that an if statement is a conditional statement that only executes once. If x is less than 1, it's going to execute. If x is greater than 1, it's not going to execute. That's literally it. Whereas a loop is going to loop until a certain condition is satisfied. That's the difference. Cool. Then after that, we have switch statements. I didn't touch on switch statements. However, I intend to touch on switch statements because they're very vital if you want to have a code whereby someone can actually choose a certain something and execute in a certain way that is going to allow your program to do a certain something. Like for instance, choosing a certain letter, choosing a certain option for it to execute a certain portion of code. With switch statements, you can have different cases where if you select A, for example, it's going to execute a certain code. If you press B, another code, and getting different outputs, right? Until eventually you press a certain letter and it exits from that specific switch statement. So that's another thing I want you to take note of. So that one I'll touch on it tomorrow. So this is topic number 1 that I'm going to touch in detail tomorrow, switch statements. And then while loops, I'm not going to touch on while loops because it depends on how many people want me to. For loops, if anything, I did explain for loops in the previous session, so please do check it out. It's labeled Study With Me C++ Saturday session. Check it out. I created a playlist and there's like one video. There'll be more videos in the near future. Probably this one is going to be there as well, but yeah, it all depends. Then we have nested loops. I did talk about nested for loops, so I think that one is out of the way, right? Now, coming down to functions, which is something that I never touched on. So this is where the things that I actually am going to discuss tomorrow come in. The first thing first, I did say switch statements. So I want you to take note of that. The second thing is using functions. I did use a function in the previous session, but I don't know if you understand that in detail. So I'm going to reintroduce the idea so that it sticks in people's head. Because on the next one, we need to talk about writing functions and local and global variables, how you can have local and global variables. Another thing that I didn't explain last time is we did explain void functions, so we're going to skip that. Another thing that I didn't explain last time is reference parameters. I didn't explain reference parameters. I didn't explain reference parameters. I did explain value, passing by value. I didn't explain pass by reference, right? So that's another thing that I need to touch on in tomorrow's session. So yeah, that's that. And then after that, we're gonna move on to data structures, right? This one is very crucial. This is a topic that is very crucial because, so if anything, because there are those who have assignment coming. So if anything, I would say that this revision is going to be very helpful for you because it's going to explain things until a certain point, which should make you proper for the assignment. But please note, guys, please note, I do not provide solutions to people. I do not. I value the integrity of the institution I go to. I value the people. Degrees, like your degree has to have value. Like when you feel good that not because someone just gave you answers, but because you did it. That is very important. So with me, I don't give answers. Instead, what I do is I explain things, and then you go and write your own code. I don't even like what? I'm not even gonna touch on the assignments. I don't. So cool. Um, that is that. And then on the last part, which is the one that we're probably gonna touch during the other week session, right? Because I feel like we have to be reasonable in terms of the amount of time that we have. This one I'll touch it on the other week. On the other week session, which is probably going to be more than one session because people really struggle with this section, which is data structures. I'm going to touch on one-dimensional arrays, arrays as parameters, two-dimensional arrays, string manipulation, structs, arrays of structs, and classes. So that is basically the last how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The last 7 topics that I'm going to touch on, and then from there I'm going to move on to much more intense object-oriented programming related topics. Like for instance, I'm going to start off with input output of external files like .txt files depending on your machine, or we're going to talk about input output using .dat files, right? So that's one thing that I want to say to you. It's very crucial that you keep up, because if you miss this session tomorrow, let's say you missed the last one, right? And then you missed the one that I'm going to host tomorrow, and then you missed the one after that, then you're never going to understand what is going on when I move on into object-oriented programming, which is like a much more complex. I'm going to be using like 2D arrays like they're nothing. I'm going to be using classes like they're nothing. I'm going to be assuming that since we covered them, you understand what is going on. So I would say that you need to keep up in order for you to actually follow what we're doing as we go along. I mean, this is for your own benefit, and besides, it's free. So I'm just here and I'm going to be explaining, I'm going to be sharing my screen. So it's, technically speaking, it's I would say that it's you get 100% of the benefit, because I'm doing it for free. But also I want to add, let's say for instance you want tailored sessions. Let's say you want me or any other person who's already a graduate to explain. Oh, by the way, I'm not yet a graduate, right? But let's say you want someone who has graduated and you want them to explain certain concepts, explain certain things to you in any of your modules, be it maths, be it programming related or anything. Then obviously in that case, you can reach out to me again. Instagram, there is my Instagram page over there, and I will definitely get back to you. We can discuss how you can have one-on-one tutoring, one-on-one tutor, whereby they'll explain things from the beginning until the end without any hesitation. Like literally when it comes to that, I can tell you that they would really assist you like massive stuff. So again, Instagram, there is my Instagram page. You can reach out to me and I will link you up with the necessary people that will organize everything for you. By the way, I'm one of the people that would be tutoring. So if you want to request me to tutor you, then obviously you would have to contact me. We set up everything, discuss everything, and then make sure that it happens accordingly. Cool, because I do have a company, and the company is called DTE Innovators, which stands for Drivers of Technological Excellence Innovators. So if you can pull up and you want us to assist you, by all means, always happy. It doesn't matter what module. Right now I'm talking about C++, but also we can assist you with all the mathematical modules, regardless of which course you're doing, all the accounting modules, regardless of which course you're doing, all the programming modules, all the programming languages as well. It's not only about C++, there's other ones. I can also tutor MATLAB, I can also tutor Python, and the other tutors as well in the company who can tutor JavaScript, Java, HTML, CSS, and all the, like the R. There are different languages that you can be assisted with, including SQL and databases and stuff like that. Cool. So that is it in terms of what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, and I hope that you're going to tune in. What is going to be happening now is, since I am done talking about the plans for tomorrow, I am going to start with today's study session. In today's study session, it's all about pushing, right? I have to finish topics, and I would say, yeah, I have to finish some topics because I have some stuff that I need to submit. Deadlines very important. So with you guys, um, yeah, that's all I have to say on my side. If you have any questions, please do make sure that the questions are in the comment section. If you don't have any questions and you want to stay up for a study session, by all means, I'm going to be muted. Um, if you missed the most of the session, by all means, just watch from the beginning and you're going to get all the information you need. The reason why I had this session is because I want you to know what's happening tomorrow so that if you feel like you're fine, obviously you don't want to waste your time and just sit and hear things that you already know. But if you feel like you really need the assistance, then by all means, you should definitely tune in. So that's what I'm saying about tomorrow's session and what is going to be happening. So, with that being said, let's begin with today's study session. All the best. Hello guys, that my phone is probably gonna switch off any moment now. I have it plugged on the charger, but I don't know why it's not charging. Probably it's because I'm plugging it on my laptop and I'm using it as the camera, so it's on 1% right now. So I'm thinking that once it goes to zero, it's probably gonna switch off. So which means I'll have to end the live. But I want you guys to know that I will be hosting a session for all night studying. So meaning that we're gonna study like all night, and I'm gonna start it once my phone is like well charged. Right now I'm gonna continue. I don't know if you can see that even the quality is like kind of coming back. But right now I'm going to continue until the phone goes off. And then even after the live has ended, I'm just gonna continue whilst I'm charging my phone. Then once the phone is charged, maybe it's like when it's like 50 or something like that, then I'm just gonna start another live, which should be a live that goes on for most of the night. Hopefully the battery is gonna hold. Um, yeah, that is going to be something that I'm gonna do once I come back. But for now, thank you guys for watching. If you want to take a break until then, that's chilled. Otherwise, I'm just gonna continue until the phone just goes off because I don't see a reason why I should stop it. So yeah. Otherwise, please do subscribe so that when I start the other live, you get notified so that we can start. I mean, sending the message in the groups can be quite exhausting. So just make sure that you subscribe so that it becomes easier. Another thing is you can join my Discord where I actually will be posting future links because I realized that some people have a problem with me posting in the group chats, so it becomes a bit of a fussy situation, and I don't want that kind of weird vibes from people. So yeah, so the time that I'll be posting in the groups is very limited. So it's either you subscribe or you join the Discord so that I can just start the live and people get notified and stuff. Of course, you subscribe and then turn the notification so that you get notified. Otherwise, I'm gonna be starting another live probably around 8 or 9, and that session will be like for the whole night, probably until around 2 3 day. So if you want to join that session, then you can definitely wait for that session, and then we proceed until 2 3. I mean, tomorrow is a weekend, or in South Africa where I am, tomorrow is gonna be a weekend, and yeah, and then yeah, we'll just see how that one works out. But another thing is just subscribe so that you get notified on time, so that everything can be simpler and easier. Um, Otherwise, yeah, if you see it go off, don't be surprised. Phone is battery low. Oh, number of instructions performed in each script.